Thank you very much. It's an honor to be part of such a vast panel of scholars. I'd like to say that my visual presentation is very much based on practice. I'm a visual artist and I make work, and I often end up doing a lot of research, which is a different form of research perhaps to what you would call a traditional scholar doing research, but comes in the form of trying to understand things within a visual framework. So I'd like to present this series of images across 3 projects that I've been engaged in over the last few years. And some of these are ongoing concerns, and some of the work has already happened and it's become part of my own history. So recently I was discussing some thoughts with Arif Hassan Saab, and there was something he said that struck me as very important, and something that also disturbed me a little bit. He said, the traditions are gone, but we do not know it. And I was quite affected by that line, and I've been thinking about it for some time, because I think it makes me question about how a statement like that impacts the point from where we start to think about the role of tradition, its preservation, and for what reasons we're preserving it. Also because I think that we are living within a very, tradition is very much part of our space. We all acknowledge it, and so to imagine that something which is so familiar and comfortable and essential to our being has already been stripped away is a very, very strange thought. It's a very discomforting thought. And at the same time, it also made me question what aspects of tradition does my work relate to. When Subul discussed the framework of this seminar, I was thinking about the ideas or the techniques. What are the things that I am concerned with, and also what is my role as a visual artist in relationship to tradition, which is all around us. From the morning session, I feel a little bit that we are trying to protect tradition in some way, as if it's threatened. And I feel that we are all probably quite converted in this room in terms of understanding that we live in a traditional society, or perhaps that we are transforming through a traditional society into something else. It's also a condition which I think many modernizing countries, I don't want to use the word modernizing because it seems to be a space in which we are already dead, but I think in so many traditional, in countries which are transforming, there is a lot of crisis. If you look at countries like Taiwan, Japan, India, Iran, I think all of these societies are going through a transformative process, have been for the last, since the turn of the century. And that crisis is manifest not only in the spiritual world, but also within contemporary art, within architecture, within music and fashion. And I don't think that we can isolate our feelings of trepidation and insecurity as just our own. I think we share them with a lot of other countries in this region. my approach, as I was thinking about this seminar, was to really look at my work, to share my work with you, and also to say that I think my connection to tradition is very much on an intuitive level. So the work and the projects that you're going to see are very much about looking at my position within society, or how I relate to the circumstances within which I find myself. And the first few images are a project called Henna Hands. I'm calling it project because I kind of feel it's still ongoing, although it's transformed quite considerably. These are a series of site-specific works that I did on public walls in the city of Karachi, in the cantonment area. And this work started in 2002. And the way it started was very interesting. I was looking at the idea of, well, actually the notion of marriage, and but also thinking about what would represent this institution. And I thought about Mehndi. And so within my studio space, for almost a year, I was working on these figurative works, which were made through stencils. So I've essentially worked with the human figure for many years. And so working with my model in my studio, I would make stencils around her body, and then I would cut them out carefully in vinyl, and then roll them up, take them out. And on the wall, use smaller hand stencils and use Mehndi paste, Mehndi pigment, straight onto the wall. And so after about a year of seeing these in my own studio, I realized they didn't belong there, they didn't belong in the gallery space. And so I wanted to test the waters. I wanted to see how as a figurative female artist working with the body, how does the public space view the works, or tolerate the works, or understand them, or not understand them. And so in the Kent Station area, this was a mohalla which was actually very much a middle class area. And the significance of this mohalla is only now becoming more visible to me, because it was a very multi-racial sort of community. You had the church, you had the Parsi community living there, Muslims of course, and also some of the walls on which I worked, I realized were also the Hindu quarter. And all of this, I discovered as I worked on the ground in that space over a number of weeks, making the work very early in the morning and coming back very regularly to see how it had changed, how it had been erased, how people in that community thought about it. This image is a march of women, which I responded to from the previous slide, which was a call for a march by a political party. So, I did one figure, and then I realized I need to make my own army and let the march come across that wall. So it was really a very direct response to that wall talking announcement. But also, this project was important for me when I think about tradition, because not only was I using a very traditional material which had a place in the home, it had a space within a feminine world of social, custom, but at the same time I was putting it out there in a very public space, but in a very private way. So it was about trying to understand, what happens when you place something so private into a public space. And also, I think for me also the work became more metaphorical, because I think throughout that time I have been thinking about female identity within our context through the body. So when I placed the work within that space, I began to understand how female identity and identity issues were being viewed and understood. So a number of images which have some of the work. Also at the same time, something that didn't really come out directly in the work but was happening in the background of the space of time that I was making this work was a lot of Shia Sunni riots in Karachi, and simultaneously the Ali Expressway was being sanctioned, and as a result of which thousands of people, businesses, community, a whole traditional community lost its bearings in a sense and was scattered within Karachi. And at that time I was thinking about these bodies and trying to envision them being made on walls which would consequently be demolished. And the impact of that, the consequence of sort of marking a protest in a sense as a visual artist, as a female artist, on walls which would the next day perhaps be demolished. Living within a traditional family system, I was not allowed to venture to the demolition sites, and with the backdrop of the Shia Sunni clashes that were happening at that time, it wasn't possible to do that, but those were the kinds of ideas that I was trying to project. The second thought which runs through my work for many years is looking at the idea of drawing practice. This is not just a technical position, but it's also, I think, a conceptual concern for me. And I think for almost a decade I abandoned many other forms of working in order to just draw. And it happened in a very needful way, because I felt other forms of expression were not, other processes and mediums were not moving with my thought process, and they were actually impeding the ideas that I wanted to work with. So really for a very long time, and I still hold drawing very close to my practice as my primary practice. This traditional medium was something that I was, I think, also refiguring in a cultural context. And I think I was very much perhaps looking at it from a Western point of view, placing the hierarchy of drawing above perhaps painting or oil painting, which is what I was rejecting at that point. I think tradition also for me is a sort of ongoing process. I don't see it having ended somewhere and modernism having taken over in any way. I think as a visual artist, I'm not only confronted by, but I'm surrounded by, and part of a whole process of thinking, which is, been passed down not only through education but through a social framework. These are drawings on canvas called Homage to Hokusai, who was a Japanese printmaker from the 17th century. And the interesting thing was, again, looking at the female space, or looking at femininity, or looking at intuition, looking at female identity through an intuitive approach. I was stuck in a traffic jam once in Gizri, that same stretch where we all get stuck. And the van in front of me had a whole group of women clustered, stuffed into it. It was an open Suzuki van, and there were about 15, 20 women sitting there, all in burqas, all covered. And, I was looking at them, and somehow, in the blink of the eye, when you see the reverse image, or is it a mirror of that thought, what was mirrored in my mind were these images of hair. And I was quite perplexed and confused about why this image had surfaced in my mind. This is after the work had been done. And what was the connection between those women and this particular body of work? And I think in some ways it was the inversion of what they were. Perhaps it was the feeling out of what was on the inside of those women. So drawing the figure a lot in an academic way, but also very much in a personal way. This is called boundless, bound and boundless. Let me remove through the images here. And I think that one of the things that I was trying to do in drawing was really find not just a technical approach, but a certain kind of language through the work, so that this wasn't about working with the body in terms of a voyeuristic approach or a purely academic approach, but really through a very personal, intuitive response to things around me. The drawings have also become larger in scale over a period of time, and I'm just going to show you a few more images. Have become very large in scale. This is about 10 feet by 9 feet. And this was a very specific work which started off a series of a sort of investigation, I suppose, on a text which I wasn't interpreting or illustrating, but a text which really ran parallel to my own visual practice. And that text was Vihishti Zevar, Heavenly Ornaments, which, as some of you may know, was written by Maulana Ashraf Thanawi in the early 20th century as a reformist sort of text for educating women, Muslim women in India, at a time where Muslim society was under threat perhaps, or maybe losing its way. So it's a very interesting text, and the more I read it, the more I felt these are things which are part of me. These are things that I've been, that the way I think, this is how I want to speak, this is how I want to behave. So I mean, splitting yourself off and trying to understand the tradition, which is something separate from yourself, was a difficult thing to do. But I realized that although I might have taken a certain position on the text, I was still aware that that text was part of me in some way. Next. So there's a series of drawings. This one and the next one is working very closely in relation to a traditional discourse or painting. It's referring to Rembrandt's image painting of Henrique bathing in the river, in which she's standing in a pool of water in her night dress. And I think it was this drawing that triggered off, a continuation of thinking about the body and thinking about identity, but thinking about it more through attire, through the clothes that we wear, and how that becomes a metaphor for certain ideas. The next image is also referring to a painting, but also to a small parable from the Bible, Book of Lot, story called Susanna and the Indus. And again, I found myself in this sort of triangle of ideas which connected to certain historical works, but also when I researched further into it, also other traditions of painting, other traditions of scripture, which had certain ideas that I was looking at. So the idea of attire being an important element or object which represented the body, perhaps, has recently become more central in the work, and there is a real absence of the body, I suppose, in the next few images, which I don't think are less subversive than perhaps seeing the physical figure itself. These are a series of drawings, but it's titled Working Armor. This led me to, well, the drawings led me to make sculpture works in steel, which could be worn, but which were also scaled to the scale of the body. And I was really thinking about issues of being positioned in a space like Karachi in Pakistan, and I think some of these works perhaps the idea of defense comes into it, the idea of seduction comes into it as well, both things being part of the object itself. This is some of the sculpture works just near the beach front, near the Indus Valley. The chastity belt was something that I was looking at and thinking about for a number of years, having seen it in the Doge Palace Museum, having explored its sources, its origins, its traditional origins, where and when and how, in what sort of social circumstances it had been used. And I wanted to create my own version of the chastity belt, which was not with a lock, but with a zip. And it came, again, in a very sort of fluid and unforced kind of way, because I think I arrived at the conclusion that it needed to be, I needed to shift the whole paradigm of why it was being used and by whom. A number of works which not only relate to the body but also relate to traditional attire, and were being inspired by traditional attire in a sense, looking at the way that traditionally certain kinds of garments held the body together, covered it up, as well as articulated the sexuality of the body in a certain way. And a very dear friend brought some old clothes that her grandmother had kept away in a trunk. And these were a mixture of silk, chodis, and sort of waistcoats. And I was amazed to see the construction of these garments which had been used in the early 20th century, and how economically they used the material, but at the same time how they dressed the figure, and also revealed it in certain ways. So this was my my understanding, which came out in this piece, which is called Spine, but it's made from steel and red slate. Another work which is called Armor Suit for the Rani of Jhansi. I was not really looking at, well, I was looking at historical facts, but I was also thinking about a certain point of view, maybe a female point of view, maybe a personal point of view. But I was looking at the idea of the Rani of Jhansi having fought the British, laden with jewels and pearls and her armor and her silks to defend her state and her community. And that inspired me to come up with this piece with feather and leather and spikes and steel. And a few more images where the work has moved on. I felt the armor pieces, after a period of time, I had to move on. I was thinking about performance, I was thinking about working in soft fabrics. And these two images, this one and the next one, perhaps reveal my desire to kind of use the body, the object, in a different kind of relationship. Over this period of time, around 2007, the work was really evolving and moving, and I was thinking a lot about body and geography and images of walls and different kinds of ideas of space were coming into the work. And so these next few images really lead into the project that I'm involved in over the last 2 years. And I pulled out these images because I think that when I made them, I wasn't conscious of what they were about. And I wasn't really able to understand them either. I just feel that they were coming out of some part of my consciousness. And they were still very visceral, but they also talked about a different set of concerns. So these drawings, I think I can only term them as landscape in a traditional terminology, but I don't think they are really about landscape. I think they are about a certain kind of geography and also its relationship to the body. This is a drawing called Iron Clouds. These are very large scale drawings, they're about 5 feet by 6 feet. And this is about 6 by 5. Again, this is the point when I started going to Manora Island and looking at the different structures of the island and looking at the kind of community. So these next drawings are really about looking at structures which are real and some which are unreal. And there's a lot to say about Manora, but I think what's really important is that it's a very porous space. It's a space which is in flux. And earlier on we were talking about the idea of flux and the idea of things sort of colliding with each other. And over the last, sorry, we just stopped here for a second. Yeah. Over the last 2 years, I was going to Manora, constantly trying to search for something, and searching through many different ways, through photography, through video, through drawings. And through sculpture works as well. And I realized that every time I went to the island, I found that the structures and the kind of collapse of the traditions in that small island were giving me a way to enter the space, and also to try and I was looking at the narratives that were part of that space, but I was also beginning to create my own narratives, my own understanding of the community, of the disenfranchisement of the community, and most of all, I think, just to find a kind of horizon, which I think is a balancing point for me in the work. These are stills from a short film that I made, which really pulls in three major concerns that I had seen in the island. One was the built structures of the place, the kind of very multi-religious space. The Hindu temple, the shrine, the church, the lighthouse, the mosques in that small space, all of them having coexisted at a certain period of time. And I think it also has made me think about the whole idea of facing the sea and looking outwards. Because in the density of Karachi, you don't really look, you don't even find the horizon between all the blocks of flats you're rushing through in your car, and you just begin to see a little bit of horizon. So I think being able to look outwards to the sea, to the Indian Ocean, made me think about the geography of water and the relationship of this to the landmass. This was a performance that I did on the island last year, in which I was painting furniture from a schoolyard which had been demolished because 4 children died under its walls. So this was a sort of homage to that incident. And the last two images really bring me to the place where I'm at, which is this whole idea of flux and this idea of the forest space. And I feel that this condition of crisis and this condition of rupture is, for me as a visual artist, a really important opportunity, or it has become a vehicle or a state through which I think I can access the space in a very different way, and the location in a very different way. And the previous images of these Balochi women walking through on the beach in Manora were images I took about a year ago, but they were sitting in my studio for a really long time, and I was trying to figure them out. And it was only through this painting that I began to reconcile what I was seeing in that image, which was a sort of collision of different realities, a sort of, well, not necessarily collision, but perhaps even the fact that they both exist within the same space. And this large canvas, which is exhibited at the Indus in the gallery right now, the first thing that happened in this image was that I painted the temple, and then I painted the playground, and I wrote between the temple and the playground on the canvas. And that seemed a very important intuitive sort of reaction, because, and when I stepped back to think about why I had written this, I felt it was an important position to take in terms of looking at the reality around me, but also the idea of spirituality and the idea of two different kinds of states coexisting. So I shall end at that, and thank you.